Before I tell you how my own son looked me in the eye and told me I was not invited, let me ask you to imagine something. You are sitting at your own kitchen table, in the house you paid off with 30 years of work, holding a cup of coffee that has gone cold because your hand stopped moving the moment the words landed. Your son is smiling, not cruelly, casually, the way someone smiles when they have already decided something and are simply informing you of the result. He says, "Just the four of us, Mom, you understand, right?" And your daughter-in-law nods beside him like the decision is already framed and hanging on the wall. You say nothing. You nod once. You pick up your cold coffee and you drink it. Because in that moment, something very old and very quiet inside you stops asking permission to be angry. That was the morning I understood that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is the first move in a game your opponent does not yet know has started. Before the story gets darker, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what city you are watching from. Because betrayal does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it sits at your kitchen table, calls you Mom, and waits for you to stop breathing. My name is Nargis Osman. I am 61 years old. I spent 34 years as a hospital billing administrator in Lahore and later in Karachi after my husband's company transferred us. I am not a woman who talks about money easily. In my culture, in my generation, you did not say what you earned or what you owned. You just worked. You just kept going. I worked double shifts in the early years when my sons were small and my husband Tariq was building his transport business from a single truck to a fleet of 11. I kept every receipt, every invoice, every contract, not out of distrust, out of discipline. When Tariq died of a heart attack 9 years ago, he left me the house in Gulberg, the remaining savings, and a small commercial property in the city center that we had bought together in 1998. My sons had grown. I thought grief would bring us closer. I thought loss was something families survived together. What I did not understand then was that grief sometimes reveals who was waiting for what all along. I had one thing left that Tariq always said was my greatest strength. I knew exactly where every document was and exactly what every account contained. My elder son Kamran was 40 at the time of this story. He had his father's jawline and his father's confidence, but none of his father's patience. He worked in real estate and had married Saba, a woman who smiled beautifully at gatherings and said very little when decisions were being made, which I later understood was not shyness. It was strategy. The first small moment that I noticed but excused came about a year after Tariq's death. Kamran asked very casually one afternoon whether the commercial property was still registered in both my name and his father's. I said yes, naturally. Tariq had never transferred sole ownership to me because we had planned to do it together. And then there was no time. Kamran nodded slowly and said nothing more, just nodded. The way a man nods when information has settled into a plan he has not yet spoken aloud. I told myself he was asking out of concern. I told myself he was thinking about family security. Love makes you speak well of people long after the evidence has stopped cooperating. The first incident was the property lawyer. Kamran told me he had found someone to help formalize the transfer of the commercial property into my name alone. Practical, he said. Protective, he said. Clean, he said. He brought the lawyer to my house on a Tuesday. The man spoke quickly, placed papers in front of me and directed my attention to certain lines. I signed where indicated. It was only 2 weeks later, speaking to my own longtime attorney, that I learned the document I had signed was not a transfer into my name. It was a power of attorney granting Kamran the authority to manage and make decisions about the property on my behalf. When I asked Kamran, he said I had misunderstood, that it was temporary, for convenience. The second incident came 4 months later. Kamran asked me to add Saba as a joint holder on one of my savings accounts, just in case of emergency, Mom. You are alone. What if something happens? I said I would think about it. He asked again the following week and the week after. The third incident was the Greece trip. My younger son Imran, his wife Zara, Kamran and Saba had planned a holiday together. 10 days in Greece. Beautiful, expensive, organized without a single word to me until Kamran mentioned it at breakfast. Just the four of us, Mom. You understand, right? Something moved in my chest like a cold stone shifting. I understood far more than he intended. The discovery came on a Thursday evening when I was looking through an old email address I rarely used, searching for a property insurance document. What I found instead was a forwarded email chain. Kamran had sent it to Saba and Imran from an address I did not recognize 6 months earlier. In it, he had laid out a plan. The commercial property, once the power of attorney was confirmed active, could be listed without my signature. The savings account, if Saba became a joint holder, could be drawn down gradually. The house in Gulberg, he wrote, would be the final step once other assets were secured. He had used the word assets, not mother, not home. Assets. There was a line near the end that I read 3 times. She will not check the documents closely. She never has. She trusts me. I closed the laptop with both hands very carefully. I did not cry. I had been a billing administrator for 34 years. I had caught errors worth hundreds of thousands of rupees in hospital accounts. I had built systems. I had trained staff. The woman who never checked documents closely had been keeping his father's business accounts balanced since before Kamran could spell his own name. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the cold come. The next morning I called my attorney, Farida, a woman I had known for 20 years. I did not tell her everything on the phone. I said I needed to meet urgently and privately. When we sat down, I showed her the email chain. Farida's face did not move, but her pen started moving immediately. The power of attorney, she told me, could be revoked. I revoked it that same week, quietly, without informing Kamran. Then I visited my bank in person and had every account restructured. No joint holders, new passwords. I spoke to the branch manager directly, a woman named Mrs. Perveen, and explained that I had concerns about unauthorized access attempts. She flagged the accounts with extra verification protocols. Then I went to the land registry office and placed a legal hold on the commercial property, which meant no transaction could proceed without my physical presence and verified consent. Farida helped me draft a full inventory of every asset, every account, every document. I placed everything in a locked drawer and gave Farida a copy. Kamran came for dinner that Friday. He sat at my table, ate my food, and talked about the grease trip with Saba as if the world was exactly as he had arranged it. I served tea and smiled and said nothing, because a woman who has spent 3 decades catching invisible errors knows that the best time to reveal a mistake is not when you find it. It is when the person who made it is completely certain they have gotten away with it. 3 weeks later, Kamran called me in the afternoon. His voice had an edge to it that he was trying to cover with politeness. Mum, I spoke to the property office today. They said there is a hold on the Gulberg commercial plot. Do you know anything about that? Yes, I said. I placed it there. A pause. Why? I asked him to come to the house. That evening, Kamran arrived with Saba. Imran came too, which told me they had spoken before arriving. I had Farida seated in my sitting room when they walked in. Kamran stopped when he saw her. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, calculation mixing with the first edge of fear. I placed the printed email chain on the table between us. I watched him read the first line. I watched the color leave his face the way a light dims when a switch is turned. Saba's eyes went to Kamran's, and something passed between them that was not surprise. It was recognition. Imran looked at the paper and then at his brother and said nothing, which was its own answer. I said very quietly, "The power of attorney has been revoked. The property hold is active. Every account has been restructured. Nothing you planned can move forward." Kamran started to speak. I raised one hand. "You wrote that I never checked documents closely. Your father married a woman who caught billing errors that senior consultants missed. He would have liked you to know that." Farida spoke next, which was why I had asked her to be present. She informed Kamran formally that the attempted use of the power of attorney for undisclosed property transactions constituted potential financial abuse, and that documentation had been prepared accordingly. She placed her own folder on the table. If any further attempt was made to access, transfer, or encumber any asset in my name without verified direct consent, The matter would be reported to both the relevant financial authorities and submitted to the family court for a formal protective order. Kamran's lawyer, who had drafted the original power of attorney document, had already been notified by Farida's office that the instrument had been revoked and that his conduct in the matter was under review. Saba did not speak at all during this. Imran, to his small credit, looked at his brother and said, "You told me this was all above board." Kamran had no answer for that. Farida stood to leave and said, as she gathered her papers, that in her 30 years of practice, the clients who protected themselves with documentation always stood on safer ground than those who relied on trust alone. She shook my hand at the door. The room behind us was very quiet for a long time. That night, I sat in my kitchen longer than usual. The ceiling fan turned slowly. My neighbor's rooster made his first noise at 5 in the morning the way he always did, unbothered by the weight of what had happened in the house next door. I made myself a cup of kahwa, the way Tariq used to like it, with cardamom and a little honey. I did not feel triumphant. Triumph would have required an enemy. What I felt instead was the particular grief of being right about someone you raised, someone you washed and fed and worried over through fevers and failures and all the ordinary love of a mother's life. Being right did not feel like winning. It felt like finding a crack in a wall you had always believed was solid, and understanding the crack had been there for years and you had simply been the last to see it. I drank my kahwa slowly and listened to the city begin to wake up outside. That was enough for that morning. Just that. I learned something I will carry for the rest of my life. Trust given without verification is not love. It is an open door with no one watching it. The people who tell you that you are too careful, that you worry too much, that you should simply have faith, sometimes they are the very reason the door needed watching. Keep your documents, know your accounts, and understand this clearly. Love that asks you to stop paying attention is not protecting you. It is protecting itself. Do not confuse the two. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and leave your city in the comments. It means more than you know. I will see you in the next one.